Welcome back to my channel, fellow gardeners. Today I want to talk about propagating succulents, and we've done a lot of propagation recently of succulents. And basically this one is called a lavender scallop. Now why they call it a lavender scallop is because of the shape of its leaves. It's very narrow at the tip, at the bottom, and it sort of fans out into a shape of a scallop. Now, they do have different varieties. So I have this one, and I do have the variegated one. So today I'm going to show you how we're going to propagate this plant, the succulent, so you too can make many for your home and for your container pots. My name is Alice, and I'm the Red Soil Gardener. So today we're going to propagate this succulent. It's called, as I mentioned earlier, it's called a lavender scallop, and it's actually the shape of its leaves. That's why they call it a scallop. But basically I have two varieties. So I have this one, which I consider the normal variety, which has these lovely, like a grayish blue colored leaf. And then I have a variegated version here. It's more pinkish cream, and some of the leaves actually have like a bicolor. And here I have a green with cream, and I have a blue, cream, and also pink. So these succulents are so forgiving, and they're so easy to maintain and so easy to propagate that I feel that let's introduce to beginners, gardeners, so that you can be encouraged once you see how simple it is to propagate. Now the thing about these plants is it's, let's look at the light, is basically they're sun-loving succulents. If you do have these plants in your house, what sort of light requirement? As we said, they are sun-loving, but they can actually survive in bright indirect sun. So basically, if you do have it as an indoor plant, make sure that it does have the bright indirect sun and don't give it shade. Again, the problem is if your apartment is quite dark, is that what happens with these plants is that they start growing really tall and lanky and looking for the sun, and they could tip over. And also the other thing is that if you do have shade, it does lose its variegation, especially in this particular plant. It actually is very important to actually just suss out what your apartment is or your home is, and just move the plant around until you find the right situation for this plant. Now, what sort of water does it want? The thing about these succulents is basically it is totally drought resistant, and they do actually keep a lot of water in their leaves. So even if you have forgotten to water it for a month, it's fine because it will survive. However, at the same time is that you could do your finger test and let it dry in between a drink. And once you do feel your finger test and it is completely dry, you can water this plant. Now the other thing is, okay, we've got it in a cacti mix, and we've talked about the light, and we've talked about the watering. Now the other thing I'd like to note with these plants is that they are very fast growing, and in some countries they do look at them and say that they are invasive only because they spread so quickly. Now if we look at this plant here, is we do get aerial roots, and here they are. And as this plant, which I had propagated a while ago and put it in a small container, as it was quite small and now it's big, is this bit has dropped. Now in a normal, like if you do have this plant in the ground in your garden, is once it does drop, what happens is that the aerial roots do adjust themselves, and also it does start rooting, and so basically you create another another plant here, and it just keeps moving and actually multiplying. Now, this is why we actually look at the plant and say, if you do want to grow this plant, you can grow it en masse, because you can grow it along your driveway where it's uninterrupted, and as it drops its leaves, as we see, the plantlets will form, and as it moves along and settles in the soil, you will get a multitude of these plants happening. However, if you don't want it to be invasive, you can control it and grow it in a container where you actually do have it in a container, so you could still see its beauty, and at the same time it doesn't have the chance to travel and drop its leaves and also secure itself in the ground. So now what happens is that once it does flower, and it does have a very beautiful flower, like all kalanchoys, and we've seen it with the mother of 1,000 and the mother of 1,000,000, their flowers are always so dramatic. And this also has the same sort of flower, which is a long stem, and you have these sort of chandeliers of lovely peach flowers that actually drop, and then you do get butterflies and you do get the hummingbirds, and they do come for the nectar. However, is that what happens with this particular plant, it does bloom only once in its lifetime, and once it does bloom, the mother plant does die. But as we know now, is that even though the mother plant does die, it continues to travel and has all these little shoots coming up, which you could actually propagate. Now, propagating this plant is very simple, like with all succulents, and it is a kalanchoy, and it is fast growing, and so it's really easy to propagate. But basically, all these kalanchoys, or let's say succulents, they're very, very easy to propagate. Now, what I'll show you is one method here. So one method is, we'll use this one, is I'm just going to simply snip that and just remove some of these leaves. And these are the aerial roots, by the way. So when you see these things, don't get shocked about it. It's just the aerial root. But I'm going to snip that off and remove some more of these leaves. And that one. And all I do is that all these nodes are there where the aerial roots were. And all I'll do is just simply place it in a well-draining cacti mix. And let me make the hole a bit bigger. And just leave it there moist and in direct sun, just simply like that. And you already have a propagation. Now, one way of actually propagating is actually, is actually taking a stem cutting like that and removing its leaves. Now, what happens is that once you do take a stem cutting, like as I've done, is you could, and these are the aerial roots, famous aerial roots, which I'll just snip off. Once you do, you could actually take your leaf and just place it, as I've done here, just place it in a nice moist container, similar to what I've done. Just place it. And as we've seen with this variegated plant, this one, as I dropped the leaves here, you do get these tiny little plantlets. Look at them, how sweet they are. And so if I was to plant this plantlets, I would actually look at the back and see if there is some sort of rooting. And if you don't get any rooting, I would actually return it and wait a bit. So, oh, here we have a rooting. Look at that. So we have a rooting from one of the plantlets. Look at that. Isn't it so sweet? Let me just... And it is actually quite a strong rooting. But what I will do with this particular one is I'm going to put it back, because I think at this point is I want to wait until the actual plantlet is a bit more stronger. So that's what you could do, is just actually put your leaves here, and then once again is you will get your plantlets. These ones I'd actually done exactly the same thing as we've done here. So what I want to do is, again, as usual, let's pull it out and let's look. And here you do get, oh my gosh, this is so sweet. So what I have here is, it has worked, the propagation. I do have rooting, but the most beautiful thing is, again, it started to branch off. So there's a baby, like a stem forming here at the side, and it will fill out. So I'm going to put this one back, and let's have a look at the other ones. I always get so curious to see how these rootings, if they're a success. So this is the other one. Again, it's a variegated one, and as you see, we got all these lovely pinks in there, and it appears that one side is actually blue, and then the other side has a bit more white. So I'm just going to pull it out and see. Again, this propagation, this is about 4 weeks. Yeah, it's about 4 weeks old, and so you do get a very strong rooting from this particular plant. And look at that, that's a lovely rooting again. And so what I'm going to actually do with these plants, give it another 2 weeks, and then once I do get sufficient fruits, I will move them into a bigger pot and then slowly introduce it into my garden. And I think what I will do with this particular plant is actually do a container gardening, you know, grow it in a container and then manage it, because at the same time I don't want it to take over my whole garden, but I will do that. So let me remove it, put it back into its lovely home and feel comfortable while, sorry. So what we have here is 2 propagations that I actually made about a month ago, and we have done exactly what we've done here, where we snipped some of the stem, placed it in moist soil where the cactus mix, and they have taken root. And then we have also seen that we have plantlets here. And once these little plantlets do get a rooting of its own, we will transfer them and try to grow them. So basically, do get yourself one of these plants because they're so beautiful. Look at that. And do have it in your home and keep it there. It's just basically make sure that it doesn't, that it does get bright indirect sun. And what you could do again is, if you're not sure on the location, do take your plant and move it around, and then it will find a place that it will be happy, and you just leave it in that same place where it finds its happiness, and it should be good to go. So thank you so much, fellow gardeners. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to subscribe and press that notification button. We do upload our videos every Thursday. Do send me comments and also check my Instagram account. I do actually post a lot on Instagram. I do post whatever flowers are coming up, and also I do put my little dogs there. Well, they're not puppies, they're just small dogs. And do get yourself a plant, and happy gardening.